Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Hormonal Dysfunction Through the Genomic Lens. Today's presenter is Dr. Ralph Esposito. Just a brief introduction to Dr. Esposito. He is a naturopathic physician, acupuncturist, and functional medicine practitioner specializing in integrative urology, men's health, and nutrigenomics. His precise and personalized style utilizes a systems biology and precision medicine approach to medicine. In addition to advising as a peer reviewer for medical journals, he has authored several medical textbook chapters and has designed education modules for health professionals specifically on urological conditions, male and female hormone dysfunction, hypogonadism, exercise, men's health, and sexual dysfunction. Dr. Esposito has trained under Dr. Peter D'Adamo, originator of Opus 23 at the Center of Excellence in Generative Medicine at the University of Bridgeport, and at NYU Integrative and Functional Urology Center. He holds a position as adjunct professor at New York University, where he lectures on integrative medicine. Currently, Dr. Esposito serves as a medical consultant and research analyst. And Dr. Esposito, we're very happy to have you today. We've generated a lot of interest in this topic, and I'm just going to hand it over to you and let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I really appreciate this, and I'm super excited to be able to talk to everybody about the precision approach using genomics and analyzing hormonal function or dysfunction. It's a very, very difficult field to navigate, and as I mentioned to a lot of my colleagues, um, endocrinology and functional and integrative hormonal health really brings the art and science of medicine together, and bringing an extra layer with genomic testing, especially with GenomicInsight, gives us, a much larger advantage than we had even a year or two ago. So I'm very excited to walk you all through this program, figure out, what goes inside my head when I see a genomic report from GenomicInsight, and then figure out how we can make any type of changes moving forward with the person in front of you. A lot of this, when you hear other practitioners talk about genes and SNPs and try to make sense of it using somebody's hormonal cascade or their hormonal milieu, it gets a little bit robotic and impersonal because everybody's hormonal picture is completely unique and different. Very infrequently do I have somebody who looks exactly like somebody else, and seldom am I using the exact same protocol for two different patients. So I think this goal of today, we'll go through some of the learning objectives shortly, but obviously will be to give any practitioner looking to get an advantage over understanding their patient's hormonal status, how they can help them moving forward, but also help educate that practitioner on hormones and hormonal dysfunction, because a lot of this can get we can get stuck in the weeds really if we try to get too myopic about this. So I'll begin now, and I'll begin with a few slides, and then we'll jump straight into GenomicInsight to give us a more hands-on approach and how it could be actually used by you rather than just having somebody telling you what to look at. So today's learning objectives, and I can't emphasize this enough, and I've mentioned this in several other webinars that we've done for GenomicInsight, you must understand the right questions before jumping into somebody's genomics. It's absolutely essential, because if you do not, you will be completely misled, and you'll be providing with the patient of either misinformed, inaccurate, or subtherapeutic approaches. So number one, you must understand what you need to ask the person, and we'll talk about that. You will learn how to master the use of the apps within GenomicInsight and targeted for hormonal dysfunction or hormonal optimization, regardless of whether you're an MD, DO, ND, nutritionist, chiropractor, whatever type of medicine that you utilize, this will be helpful and informative for you. Will help identify certain therapeutics that can be targeted for your particular patient. Some may apply and some may not. So you'll see as we go through this, I will talk about several pathways and several mechanisms as to which you should be looking out for. if that does not apply, or if that person that we're using as a sample today does not actually um, apply to the patient that you're using, that doesn't mean anything. What I will do is I will say, but if in this situation this is orange, or if this is clear, then consider X, Y, and Z. So I give you a few different tools in your toolbox that you can go back and refer to. And then very interestingly, I use this frequently. I look at the clinical information, including outside biomarkers. So whether you do a GI test like GI map, or you do urinary testing from other hormonal urinary tests like Dutch or Genova, ZRT, if you're using any of those, this will allow you to take that, put it into context with the person's own genomic makeup, their bioindividuality, and allow you to create a bioindividual therapeutic approach. And then we'll conclude with Wizard, which is our simplification tool for a quick curation report. And I'll explain to you when you should or should not be using that. Before jumping into the genome, you have to ask the right questions. And I've emphasized this in the previous slide, and I'll emphasize it again. None of this makes sense unless you have a clear background on the patient's medical history. So this includes things like, what are your symptoms? The symptoms of a 48-year-old female perimenopausal is going to be completely different and apply completely differently to a 25-year-old female. The same thing applies to a 65-year-old female, or a 65-year-old male versus a 45-year-old male, or even a 20-year-old male. They all have a different story. So you must ask symptoms, hot flashes, feeling tired, dyspareunia, changes in food sensitivities. Like, all of these things will make sense, or will make the test make more sense as you can go through them. Or even if you use other testing, such as other outside labs, including like the Dutch test, what are the metabolites of the 2-hydroxy, 4-hydroxy, 16-hydroxy estrogens? What are the COMT capabilities that give you insight into phase 2 detoxification, or the cytochrome 1A1 or 1B1 or 3A4 enzymes? What are those doing? What do we see in real life on this day, compared to what we think should be happening on the genomic level? And that allows you to have better insight as to what things are going to have the most profound impact with this person. Because again, we have an immense amount of information, but the naive physician believes that he knows everything. And I think knowing what you don't know allows you to be more precise in your approach, which sounds a little counterintuitive, because you would say, well, if I don't know something, then how precise can I be? But in fact, if you don't know something, then you know that there's other opportunity for change, and allows you to expand your toolbox. And then also looking at other hormonal values like blood work, including estradiol, testosterone, free testosterone, SHBG, fasting blood cortisol levels, urinary cortisol levels, including cortisone, the metabolites THF, THE, how those can have an impact. And then one thing that I think is very important, and I see this quite frequently, especially in women who have GI issues, is using beta-glucuronidase, which can be tested using the GI map, which allows you to identify, are there bacteria in the gut that are increasing the enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, which can deconjugate some of these hormones, which allows them to be reabsorbed. And that is a major contributor to what we see in hormonal dysfunction. So those are major points that I think you should all be taking notes on. And these are, checkoffs that you should have moving into a client call or visit. And then lastly, most importantly, you have to cover your bases, making sure that you cover everything of their family or personal history. If they've had breast or ovarian cancers, prostate cancer, hyper or hypothyroidism, PCOS, insulin resistance / diabetes, and other hormonally driven disorders. This can also include like celiac, right? Although that's not considered a hormonal related disorder, that has an impact on the gut. And that can have an impact on the whole hormonal milieu that you will see. So doing a complete thorough assessment will allow you to be a much more efficient clinician and help your client or your patient much better. Now I'm going to jump into the actual program, and we're going to start a few different places. But I want this to be a way for us to be able to utilize the whole program in its totality. Many clinicians I know or practitioners, sometimes they'll just jump to the report wizard and they'll say, well, I find this to be easier. It gives me a complete breakdown. But I want to make you a master of this program so that you can leave here today and know how to navigate this on your own. We won't go in any particular order, but what we will do is we'll jump around just a little bit, and I want to make sure that we cover the most important things first. And this is a little bit of how I approach things, and I think it's not necessarily the best or the right way. You will find your own best and right way, but essentially, regardless of the order that you go in, I suspect that you'll come to very fruitful conclusions. And I think just somebody who's had experience with this program for years will give you some insight if you are a novice in this, or even if you are an expert. It's always nice to see other people and the way that they utilize this program. So before we go into each one of these, I want to start off with the network mappings, or what I call them, the maps. And I find this to be the most important application, just to get a broad overview of exactly what's going on. Now, today's focus would be mostly hormonally driven, so perhaps the vitamin D mediated expression map might not be so applicable, but I do advise you to at least explore each one of these and see if anything makes sense for your particular patient. I'll focus on a few today, and we'll start off with the adipocytokine signaling. And many of you may ask, well, what does adipocytokine and adiponectin and these metabolic biomolecules have to do with anything in hormones, right? But when I say hormones, I'm not only talking about estrogen and testosterone, which would be considered sex hormones. I really want to be all inclusive and discuss the thyroid hormone. We're going to talk about what things we could look at that might give us an idea if somebody's actually utilizing their T4 or T3 properly. We'll also be looking at things like insulin and leptin and adiponectin, in addition to the sex hormones. And then so we'll go into that in just a second, but I want to take a second to have us look at this particular pathway. Insulin sensitivity, or your insulin receptors, have a profound impact and significant lateral impacts on all the hormonal systems. And it's probably one of the most underrepresented hormones when somebody tries to discuss, sex hormones or estrogen or even thyroid hormone. It seems to be that, endocrinologists would look at either you're diabetic and I just look at your diabetes, and either you're hypogonadal or menopausal and I just look at your sex hormones. But in fact, they actually do coincide with each other. And I want to allow us to take an opportunity to look at what this actually means. So where we see orange indicates that we have some SNPs here that are homozygous and are likely decreasing or impacting function. So you can see some here that are white, which means we really don't have any data on them. Like we don't have any SNPs on RXR, which is a retinoic X receptor, which comes up in many other pathways. But then we also have some that look gray, and those would be SNPs that are neutral and have no impact. Yellow would indicate that is heterozygous, and then obviously orange is homozygous. And typically, I keep my eye out for the ones that have a lot of orange in them. And what we see here is that adiponectin is one of the major hormones that is necessary for improving insulin sensitivity, improving lipolysis, preventing lipogenesis. So essentially, making sure you're not making more fat and helping you get rid of fat together. And we can see here that this person might have some issues in adiponectin. So first off, you can, what I would say is, well, let me look at the whole map. And then we look here that, dysbiosis, bacterial overgrowth, compromised mucosal integrity, AKA leaky gut or intestinal permeability, can cause impact in different aspects of this map. So just want you to make sure that this all does come full circle. So I would look at adiponectin and I would take a look at this. And first of all, you see that this is teaching you about the actual program. And looking at it, we see that, you can move down and aside from giving you some information, you can see that this person does have 2 SNPs on adiponectin, but she does have also other SNPs that maybe the interest allele here, like A, is the interest allele that would indicate a dysfunction, and the client does not have them, but 2 of them she does. So that for me would say, okay, well, there might be some impaired function here that could have an impact as to what we're seeing. So you can see here that there are some macros, which we'll go into later, which does suggest that this person might have does not have lower circulating levels of adiponectin. You can see that that's false, but you may have another client who actually does have lower levels of adiponectin. So we'll have to pay attention to that and see if that does apply to them, because it can have an impact on the way they metabolize their fuel, their carbs, their protein, their fats, and that along with their whole metabolic picture will give you an idea if trying to increase adiponectin would be something that would be beneficial. And these are a few of the things that you can utilize that may upregulate adiponectin at the genetic level. There's research on the Mediterranean diet, resveratrol, perhaps, caloric restriction, and we're not really entirely sure if it's due to if the caloric restriction means fasting or if it means reducing total calories. The literature just shows caloric restriction. So I would have that be part of the art that the practitioner is actually using to improve function here. And then you can click on these and add them to the actual report. But what I would do here is I would curate this, which I already have, and that will show up in the patient report so that they can understand as you explain to them. Then the next map that I would look at would be the estrogen metabolism, and especially in your female patients who may have issues with, whether they have PCOS and they have a hyperestrogenic picture, maybe they have PMS, maybe they're on hormonal replacement therapy, maybe they're on exogenous estrogen, either bioidentical or not. And this gives you the whole picture. And this is where the urinary metabolites of estrogen really come into play. And you can see here, if you had a test done by Dutch or ZRT or Genova or any of these other labs that do that type of testing, you'll see that they'll point out cytochrome 1A1, they'll point out cytochrome 1B1, and they'll usually point out cytochrome 3A4. And essentially what it comes down to is 3A1 helps with production of 2-hydroxyestrone, estradiol and estrone, and then you see the 1B1 is more responsible for the 4-hydroxyestradiol or estrone, and the 4-hydroxy is more problematic. And then you would get on those tests and say, okay, well, the 2 is high, the 4 is low, or your 16 is high and your 4 is also high, and that's problematic, and your 2 is low. Essentially, we want the 2 to be high and the 4 to be low. And when we see that on a test, we could say, okay, well, we need to give a certain therapeutic. But my question is why is that high? Why is that low? And what can we do to help improve the body's own innate ability to actually utilize its own stores to help promote that? And perhaps there is some type of genetic dysfunction or genomic SNP that allows us or prevents us from actually getting to that level and being able to eliminate these things properly. So I would look at these enzymes and say, okay, well, if I want to increase more of the 2-hydroxy, I would look at the 2 cytochrome 1A1. Obviously, it gives you education on exactly what that is. And then I would say, okay, well, this person has 1 SNP on it out of 2 that we can measure. There's a possibility that it is not functioning quite well. Let me think about, maybe kava might be a good indication for them. And might be helpful, especially if they have that anxiety type of approach. Or let me look at indole-3 carbinol, because we know clinically that actually can help improve the metabolism of the estrogen into the 2-hydroxy and away from the 4-hydroxy. Right, so those are things that you want to look at, and even things that you might want to stay away from, like caffeine, which can have an impact. The farther the dial is out on here, the more robust the research is. So I would look for ones that are more on the perimeter than those that are in the center. Also, you may see that some have two, like an antagonist and agonist. That just indicates that there is conflicting research, which then allows you to make that decision as a clinician. And then also you can look at other enzymes such as SALT, which are enzymes that help add a sulfate to certain molecules. They promote sulfation, which is part of the phase 2 detoxification. And these are different aspects that you have to look at. And also, don't forget to pay attention to the aromatase enzyme, the cytochrome 19A1, which allows you to identify if somebody has an issue with their ability to aromatize. And that certainly can have a profound impact. So as you can see here, they have one homozygous SNP, they have a heterozygous SNP, and the rest are neutral. In this type of individual, I would probably suspect there to be very minimal to no impact on their ability to aromatize. But again, you have to look at the patient's whole picture. Maybe their allostatic load is too high, or there's a different stressor or issue going on with them. And then if you want to inhibit aromatase, perhaps you look at things like selenium or chrysin, which a lot of clinicians might like to use if they really don't want to go aggressive with the pharmaceutical aromatase inhibitors. And again, I would curate this as well to show it for my patient. And you can go through other maps here as well. I mean, essentially you can go through every single one and try to find an explanation as to why it might be helpful for you. But the major ones that I would use would also be the detoxification. And you look at phase 2 detoxification because that helps us actually get rid of any type of unwanted metabolites, estrogen and or unwanted testosterone metabolites, including DHT metabolites. And you can see here the aspects that impact that would be the sulfotransferase enzymes. And look at this individual here. They have a significant decrease in function in their glutathione reductase, which is responsible for the recycling of glutathione and allowing it to be utilized as a antioxidant, one of the body's strongest antioxidants. Now, if this person has difficulty recycling glutathione and an ability for them to utilize it as a phase 2 detoxification mechanism, their ability to do that is going to be compromised. And you can see here that if you click on it, they have two homozygous SNPs along with one heterozygous, thus suggesting that there might be some significant decrease in function here. And what are things that we can do to upregulate that? Well, most clinicians will go ahead and say, well, I'm going to give glutathione. That's what I do because they don't have it, so I give it to them. But you have other options, and not saying that that's not an option, but look at riboflavin, such robust amount of evidence, 13 different studies suggesting that it can be helpful in upregulating the glutathione reductase enzyme. But also, look, glutathione on its own can be beneficial. Some clinicians like to use NAC as a precursor. Remember, NAC is necessary for the synthesis of glutathione, not necessarily for glutathione reductase. So please pay attention to that and make sure you're using the right thing as needed. But again, the most robust research would be on riboflavin. So if we really want to get into evidence-based, as I like to use, evidence-led type of research, then you really have to look at what has the most robust data, and perhaps riboflavin might be a good benefit for you. And maybe your person also has MTHFR issues, so riboflavin also hits other lateral benefits there as well. That's the beauty of utilizing this program, is that it allows you to identify where else there could be benefits that this supplement might have in the whole pathway. So as you go through the program, this is where I would say, this is where you get a big picture. Okay, I see that there's a big issue with their estrogen metabolism, perhaps their phase 2 detoxification, and they might have some issues with their insulin sensitivity or their insulin resistance. Higher insulin levels would probably exacerbate all of this. So the answer is provide them with a lifestyle that would help reduce their total insulin levels or allow them to be more insulin sensitive. There is no one herb or one vitamin that can make you more insulin sensitive. And even metformin, which is a pharmaceutical, sometimes is not as powerful. Correction, it is not as powerful as what you can do with nutrition, sleep, and exercise, especially exercise and nutrition as one of the major tools that we can use as clinicians to help somebody improve their insulin sensitivity, aside from any type of supplement that or medication that one would suggest to be beneficial for somebody with insulin sensitivity. And this also plays into consideration with your patients with PCOS, right? We know PCOS is a hormonal dysfunction, but we know that reducing insulin levels actually can help improve the LH and FSH ratio. It can help with the metabolization of the hormones and their conjugates, and it's a super important tool that we can use here. Then after going into the network maps, I would either jump into the templates or go into the macros. It depends how anxious you are to really get answers for the person. What I like to do is I like to see the whole picture, and then I want to be driven by the macros to tell me where I should focus my attention on. Most clinicians would go straight here and say, well, give me the algorithm, give me the answer, and that's fine too. But let's jump to templates so we can at least take a look at the different areas that we can have a profound impact on. One of the major areas that I see with most people who have hormonal dysfunction is thyroid dysfunction. I think levothyroxine or Synthroid is probably one of the most prescribed pharmaceuticals in medicine right now, and that's because a lot of people are experiencing hypothyroidism, and much of that is environmental, lifestyle, and part of that is also genetic. And we can see here that this individual, now, not knowing this person's background, I would probably say, this person probably does not have any major issues with their T4, T3, or TSH, because they don't really have any major issues in their deiodinase enzymes. And you can see here, deiodinase 2 helps with the conversion of T4 to T3. And we'll look separately at deiodinase 3, which helps with the conversion of T4 to reverse T3, which is not something that we want. But essentially, you can look here and say, well, there's really not a lot going on with their thyroid genomics. We know that there is some data suggesting that the vitamin D receptor can have an impact on one's ability to activate their thyroid receptors, but we don't see any homozygous impact here. You can see here it would show up in orange, and it is not. So therefore, I'm not inclined to think that there's an issue going on with their vitamin D receptor or anything with their thyroid genomics. So that's good that you check that off your list. Looking back at your adipocytokine genomics, as I mentioned earlier, this person did not have a likelihood of having low adiponectin. So again, not a major area that I would look at. Perhaps they might have some issues in their leptin receptor. So you would click on this and you would say, okay, well, what is leptin? I don't really understand. I know it's the hormone that people tell me makes me feel satiated, but why is high leptin a problem? Shouldn't that mean that I'm less hungry? And that's a good thing. But essentially what happens is that when these leptin receptors have SNPs in them that can decrease function, and we see that here, that the interest of allele is G. This patient has a GG, a genotype for this particular SNP, and then there have no affected allele for the second SNP. Then you can say here, well, they're not completely suppressed, but there might be some type of dysfunction in their leptin receptor, which then tells you that if they are on a high calorie, hypercaloric type of diet, and they are having high leptin levels, that's going to promote inflammation, and their receptors are not going to respond very well. And there's immense amount of research suggesting that high levels of leptin and leptin resistance certainly can contribute to insulin resistance. And then you move down that pathway and say, well, insulin resistance will then cause other issues in their ability to metabolize their hormones and utilize their fat. And then they have higher adipose levels, right? Because they're creating more fat cells because they aren't satiated and they're eating a lot of food. And then they increase their aromatization, right? Because aromatase lives in the adipose tissues, and then you have higher levels of estrogen in men or even in women. It creates this whole hormonal dysfunction that easily could be assessed by just looking at somebody in their whole picture. Now, that's not to say that leptin is the only thing that we really need to be looking at, but it is something that allows us to take a multifactorial approach to get to the underlying cause as to what's going on. And then you can look at other SNPs here, and there is some issue here with their interleukin 13 SNP. Very hard to say because it's just one homozygous SNP out of several. So as a clinician, I would look at this and say there might be something there, but I'm betting that these other SNPs and these other alleles are picking up for what this one might have missed. And then, you can move down to these templates and see which one applies to your particular patient. Uh, I would jump to the estrogen genomics, and then you can look through here. Well, they might have some issues in their COMT. Perhaps they do, perhaps they don't. Or MTHFR with their ability to methylate other metabolites of these hormones. This all allows you to take a more personalized approach and allows you to identify where are the areas of highest return. So I would look at their HPA axis and I would click on it and say, okay, well, what's going on here? And let's just say that this patient had immense amounts of stress. They're under a lot of stress. They really don't know how to handle their stressors. You do a hormonal test on them. You find that their cortisol levels are really high. Their cortisol metabolites are super high. They're in a hypercortisolemic type of state. And then you look at some of their receptors and some of their SNPs, their nuclear receptors for glucocorticoids, including cortisol, and you can see that they might have some glucocorticoid receptor resistance. So they can have higher levels of these glucocorticoids, such as cortisol and even exogenous glucocorticoids that somebody might be taking, like prednisone, or even a like Cortef, or even topical corticosteroids. And you can say, well, continuously giving this to these people perhaps might make them a little bit more resistant to it and can lead to hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction, HPA axis dysfunction, which essentially can have a profound impact on the way this person feels, such as fatigue and malaise and weight gain. So having higher levels of these things, they are already at a disadvantage because their receptor is not responding. And if you remember, there's a negative feedback that occurs with glucocorticoids, that cortisol goes up, your brain senses it in the hypothalamus, and then reduces the synthesis of CRH and ACTH. Well, if you're having issues in these receptors, then you have to be a little bit more sensitive, and requires an extra additional effort to try to get these receptors to be more sensitive, or to get those levels a little bit lower, because you really, really need to get those cortisol levels lower in this individual. And by looking at it, you can see they have several SNPs that show that they are heterozygous and one that they're homozygous. So not an overwhelming picture, but enough for me to say as a clinician, you know what, this person is getting yelled at every day by their boss, or they're a police officer and they're under an immense amount of stress working on the subways or public transportation. I need to focus on this, and I know that they have this own genetic predisposition to be more inclined to be hypercortisolemic. And then what are things that we can do to help regulate the activity of this gene and help perhaps make it a little bit more sensitive? And you can look at different things here, such as Google and basil, cayenne. Phosphatidylserine can help lower cortisol levels, so it doesn't really have an impact on the actual receptor. And we actually think that it can deregulate or decrease the activity of the glucocorticoid receptor. So if you really need to push somebody down and you can't get their cortisol levels down, phosphatidylserine would be a great way to potentially reduce the actual absolute cortisol levels, but also improve the sensitivity of the gene at its receptor level. And I know a lot of this can be very overwhelming for you, and it's like, well, how do I learn all of this? How do I know all of this? And essentially, by going through the program and reading every single aspect of it, where you're confused, allows you to learn more from it, and allows you to be a more informed clinician rather than somebody who's just taking what Dr. Joe said at a previous seminar. And the same thing goes for the estrogen genomics. And you can look at each and single one of these, like your homocysteine as well. MTHFR, what are these things having to do with my patient? For time purposes, I won't go too deep into that, but understanding that there are more aspects to this than aside from just your typical thyroid, adrenal, and sex hormone axes. Again, you can look at this, and one thing I wanted to bring up is the UGT enzymes. You can see they're showing up all over here, right? And what are these UGT enzymes? And there's several that are in our body, and these are glucuronosyl transferases. Excuse me, that's a mouthful. But essentially, what they do is they help us glucuronidate certain metabolites, and they're part of our detoxification pathways. And when we use this enzyme, we are when you are measuring these test results, like these urinary hormones, you are measuring the glucuronidated aspect of these. And when you have beta glucuronidase in the gut, it can deconjugate these hormones and cause them to be reabsorbed, which then means that they have to go through this whole process to be conjugated again and to be removed. Now, looking at this whole picture, you have to understand, well, where in this pathway can that be a problem? And part of that are these UGT enzymes. Thankfully, this individual doesn't have any major decrease in function of their UGT enzymes, and looks like their sulfuration salt 1A1 is also working okay, and but they have other issues that impact their ability, like the cytochrome 3A4 and the other cytochrome 19A1, 1B1. So if they have issues in their ability to not necessarily just metabolize the estrogen or their testosterone, but also if they reabsorb it via the reabsorption through the gut, now you have basically you've increased the load on the patient to be able to eliminate it. And although that's not applicable to this patient right now, I would advise all clinicians to look at that and say, well, am I making sure that this person is removing enough from their bowels, or making sure that they're having a bowel movement a day, because that has an impact on how well I can help them. And their genetics have an impact as to what is their limit. How much can I push them, and how much support do I need to give them? So if you really wanted to support some of these enzymes, you have that all right here, which can tell you what can upregulate or downregulate these enzymes. So you can look at each and every single one and say what can have an impact as to decreasing this function or not, right? So for someone with a UGT 1A1, you would look at calcium D-glucarate, you would look at dandelion, you would look at chrysin. These all have benefits in improving and helping with the UGT enzymes in eliminating any type of these reabsorbed estrogens, but also other toxins in the body, such as xenobiotics, things from the environment, BPA, et cetera, which we know are known endocrine disruptors. And these are the enzymes that are necessary in doing that. So very important to pay attention to this, especially if you have outside data on the patient. So looking lastly at any type of actionable tools that we can do, we usually go to the macros. And as you go through this, you have several ways to look at this. What I usually tell practitioners is you can filter this by the outcome, and essentially you want to look at all of the outcomes that are true. Well, what does that mean? Well, there are some tests that are not true. So let's take, for example, this will say that this person has a GSTM1 null genotype, and that is false. What I tell patients is this is something you just don't want to pay attention to. This is not applicable to you, but if you look at the things that are true, such as this person might have corticosteroid resistance or high corticosteroid syndrome, that is true, which means it is true for this patient that they possibly might have high resistance to glucocorticoids. That's a bad thing. And then we look at the magnitude. Now, the magnitude really tells you how many SNPs are involved, or what is this actual patient's report. So looking at it, I would say, okay, again, taking it full circle, looking back into the context of the patient, where they are, what are their concerns, how are they presenting clinically? Do they really look stressed out, or are they that person that hides it really well, but they're really, shaking on the inside? And you click on that, and it tells you exactly what's going on. This person has these several SNPs, these haplotypes, which can cause a resistance to corticosteroids. And that is something that I would curate. So I would put that in the curation, and that would show up in my report, and it'll tell me, there are things that we can do. And look, it's the NR3C1 enzyme that we were looking at earlier. So again, really pays attention to why you should look at the whole program and not just the macros, because you really wouldn't know what that is if you just decided, okay, I'm just gonna go along with it because this program says so. Yes, that is super informative and that's really helpful. But to get the most out of the program and the most out of this person's genomic makeup, you really should utilize this in its totality. So I would look at that and I would curate it, which I already have. I would look at other things like increased risk of metabolic syndrome, lower circulating levels of adiponectin. And you can see here that there are additional SNPs that are showing up. So you may have seen before that this person didn't have many issues with adiponectin, and that may entirely be true. But the polygenetics of the program allows you to utilize algorithms and not just create a one gene or one SNP, one disorder approach. Unfortunately, that is not how the body works. If that were the case, if we all had one SNP for MTHFR, or one SNP for COMT, or one SNP for aromatase, it either turns on or turns off, and then we'd be completely screwed, because that would mean that the body is not able to adapt to those changes. And we know that the body is smart. We know that the body can adapt, and we see this all the time. And we can, via epigenetics, impact the function of certain genes. And we can see here that there's other genes that are involved in your adiponectin. So essentially, this person may have lower circulating levels of adiponectin. So we will want to work on things that improve adiponectin activity. And that allows us to move forward and create a more thorough plan, which we'll see in the prescriptive tools and also in the SNP Navigator, which will give you a little bit more insight into that. But I would curate that, and I would say, you know what, this person might have lower adiponectin levels, might be at a higher risk of perhaps metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance. And then you can look at other issues here, like perhaps they did have endometriosis, or they had a family history of endometrial cancer. Well, you can look at this algorithm here and say, based on the estrogen receptor 1, this person has a lower risk for endometriosis, but a normal risk for endometrial cancer. So if they had no history of endometrial cancer in their family or themselves, or they had a scare where they think they might have endometrial cancer, you can say, to your benefit, the genes are helping you. You have something on your side. There's really no reason to jump to conclusions here. Let's get more information, and we can support you on this route to health and wellness. But this doesn't exclude any type of further clinical workup, but it allows the clinician to have a little bit more insight as to what can be helpful for them moving forward. Or perhaps they're concerned with, I don't want to use bioidentical hormones. I don't want to use hormone replacement therapy, or I do want to use hormone replacement therapy. Like, what does estrogen do for that? And we know that estrogen may be beneficial in improving cognitive function long term, and that might be the case for this individual because they don't have any issues with their ESR1 or their estrogen receptor alpha. So they have more cognitive impairment with age, which then can impact the decisions that you might want to make with hormonal replacement therapy, and perhaps they might benefit. And looking through this, even if you had a man who had low testosterone, you would look at their SNPs and say, hey, although this is a female client, we could say, well, maybe they actually have low testosterone because they have higher levels of SHBG, and that would drive you to want to investigate that further and say, well, maybe I should look into their SHBG and figure out, this might explain why they have issues putting on muscle mass or their libido is lower. And again, pointing out, it's not just the SHBG SNP or gene. There are other genes that influence function of this, and you can see here, the program allows you. It's so intelligent, which it amazes me how so many people are going out and saying, I have the MTHFR, I have the COMT, and I say, congratulations, that means nothing to me. What I want to know is, how are the other genes in your body influencing, and how is your body adapting? How many strikes do you have against you, and what can we do to improve your function and your genes functions now? And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail as we get to the prescriptive tools. But before we get to the prescriptive tools, I want to allow you to know that you can completely review each and every single part of these categories. So if you really were concerned about something with their endocrine and you were concerned about, let's just say they had an issue with, let's say diabetes, right? There's nothing coming up here that would suggest that they have any major SNPs or algorithms that put them at a higher risk. But if we wanted to look at any other macro, such as steroids, right? Well, we know that this is something that we already curated those, so those would already show up. This allows you to search things in depth and figure out exactly what's going on, right? So if you want to look at ApoE, you can look at that as well and say, okay, well, they have an ApoE3, E3 genotype. I'm all good to go. So really good information here for the practitioner. And then if you look at a SNP navigator, I call this pretty much the Google of it. And how does this have an impact on your hormones? Well, it's basically if you were to Google this person's DNA, and I would say, okay, well, what do I want to do? Let's say this person had really high TSH, and their free T3 was about normal, and I wasn't sure if they were a better candidate for T4 or T3 therapy, or maybe they needed other herbs or supplements to help with their conversion of T4 to T3, or even explain like why is their reverse T3 high. You could just look up thyroid and it gives you pretty much anything that has a hit on thyroid. And you can see you have the deiodinase enzyme. Well, look at this. The risk allele is G. This client is T. So they have no major issues in their ability to convert T4 to T3. I'm sorry, T4 to reverse T3. You can click on it and it'll tell you exactly what it does, right? It converts T4 to inactive metabolites like reverse T3. So if you gave this person T4, there's nothing in here indicating that perhaps that this person would be protected from reverse T3. In fact, it would tell you that perhaps that might be a caution with you. So you can also, go through each and every single one here and figure out, okay, well, what am I doing here with your deiodinase 2 enzymes? And what does this have to deiodinase 1's enzymes, right? You can essentially search anything that you would want. So you can even search estrogen, and it'll tell you everything that comes up with estrogen. Cytochrome 1b1. This is, according to this is upregulated activity. So the risk allele is C. This patient is heterozygous, and this is showing you that it's an increase in function. If you remember, cytochrome 1b1 helps make the unfavorable estrogen metabolites. So this is your way of going back and just quickly looking and saying, okay, what is the issue that I want to be looking for here? You can even just go ahead and look for a gene on its own. So you can look for MTHFR and it'll come right up here and you'll see each and every single one that they have. It's a great resource for the clinician. And then lastly, what I would do is I would go to the Curation Editor, and everything that I curated before, I would see it all in here. And then, excuse me, we have to look at the prescriptive tools and everything that we were going through. As we go through, if you clicked and curated one of those agents, it would show up here. So you can see quercetin. Well, quercetin, I curated that because I knew it had an impact on inhibiting the 3A4 enzyme and help improving my metabolism of my estrogens, right? So that's really important for your estrogen metabolism. Or I would look at indole 3-carbinol, right? Because we talked about that and how that has an impact on cytochrome 1A1, and it can have a profound impact on and upregulating that. These are different things that you would go through. Why would I curate urtica? Well, urtica has an inhibitory effect on sex hormone binding globulin, right? So you would go ahead and you say, okay, well, sex hormone binding globulin is upregulated by resveratrol, but we want to downregulate it. So you can use Uricomia longifolia, also called Long Jack. You can also use Tiangui capsule, which is a Chinese herbal formula. And then also Urtica dioica or nettle root, right? You have this access to all of these agents in here that give you things that you can do to move forward with each individual patient based on their whole genetic profile. And then this would be a way to personally curate something. So you would save it. you would go back and then you would create the editor, and this would all show up in the patient's client report. And this helps you personalize everything for the individual. You create the client report, and there you go. You have a whole report here for your patient, telling you exactly what's going to be going on. Now, this is quite a hefty document, so be very careful as to how much time you have. But essentially, you can tell your patient, this is the big picture, but here's your textbook. You could read this. Let's take a look at it, on your next visit. Or you could just give them, you could just remove this. You can essentially remove this and say, I want to look at, any type of, I want to look at one thing at a time, right? And then you could look back and you can say, okay, I'm going to remove all of these. I don't want to overwhelm them. I'm just going to do just a handful. No templates, because they're going to get creeped out by that. You keep the network maps there for a few. Maybe you just want to keep their estrogen one. You tell them what they should do. You create another report, which is much shorter. You can see here, and great, look at this. I have these templates. I have these macros. I have actionable things that we can do, natural products that are tailored to this individual. I show them their maps. Oh, I remember Dr. Esposito was telling me there was something wrong with my cytochrome 1X1. I have no idea what he was talking about. Oh, wait, let me look at my report. And I see here that I have my cytochrome 1A1. I have my 1B1. Oh, this is what I see he meant. Oh, this how it falls into consideration with the other testing that Dr. Esposito did. And and then, oh, he also told me that there were certain other drug interactions that I should really be aware of. And these are things that I should be utilizing or being careful with how I was using, such as, codeine or even other like modafinil. These are things that allow you to have a personalized approach with the patient moving forward. Now, if you really didn't want to go through that whole aspect, you could essentially just go to the report wizard. And if you really caught nothing from what I said, and you said, Ralph, you're great, but I just don't have the time to go through all of that. You go to the report wizard, you click on the estrogen genomics, you decide what you want to be added or not, and the wizard would essentially run the report as if there was a focus on the estrogen genomics, everything that was estrogen related. Some may or may not be auto-curated, but it's all there. It gives you the template. What is COMT? It tells you what it does and why that's important for your estrogen receptors, right? Then it'll tell you what was this person's SNP outcomes and how that has an impact on them, right? So this is an essential way of, a quick way of giving them all of the essentials. This is what you should really be focusing on, and it saves a practitioner a lot of time. Now, look, these are a bunch of the things that I was talking about earlier, right? I was talking about aromatase. I was talking about cytochrome 1A1. I was talking about 1B1. Now, it's as if the program read my mind. I really wish that I could take credit and say that I created this part, but that's not the case at all. It just so happens that the program is intelligent enough to know these are the important things, these are not the important things, and these are the things that really want to be helpful. And remember, I curated quercetin. I swear to you, I didn't know. I might have overlooked this when I was playing with the program earlier, but I didn't even know that the program already selected quercetin as an agent. So it surprises me sometimes as well. As you continue to move down, you continue to learn with the program, and this is something that you can hand off to the patient and show them and say, hey, this is where you want to pay attention to these few things. And then essentially you have saved yourself a bunch of time. It doesn't take the responsibility out of it, though. You still must pay attention to what you're doing for the patient. You still must pay attention as to what you're sending them home with. You can't just print this out and give it to them and say, have a fun time with this. That's not exactly how it works. You must actually review it so you know what you're sending them home with. You want to know that you're sending them home with these right natural products, right? And making sure that they're not going ahead and leaving with this whole overwhelming view of like, I have to take every single one of these. That's not true. Perhaps they might want to take, phosphatidylserine or phosphatidylcholine to help reduce their cortisol levels, or perhaps they do benefit from some quercetin with the nettles because of their ability to have issues with their glucuronidation and their detoxification. So essentially, this allows you to create a more thorough, quick approach rather than going through the whole process of understanding what's going on. So I know this is a lot to handle and certainly can be a lot to understand. Unfortunately, this is not a mainstay of most medical education, whether you're an MD, DO, ND, oftentimes does require additional training afterwards. But what essentially I think we can do is allow us to become as precise as possible with the person and the individual at hand, and not just have to rely on biomarkers and hope that and say, well, this was, answer the question like, why is my cortisol high, or why is my estrogen low? And we've done all the different tests, and just saying, well, it must be your genetics. At least you have some insight here to back up and give some evidence to your claim. It holds an immense amount of weight when you're having conversations with patients. And I think what it essentially does is it gives you more credibility, and more so, it allows you to be more therapeutic with your plan. And we know that when patients feel better, they are happy, you're happy, and everything works out. So again, if you have any questions, I know Jeff's going to talk about that, but I hope that was as thorough as possible as we can do. Essentially, this could take days, and we can go through each and every single one, but I hope that helps those who are a little bit lost in the weeds as they were going through the program.
Thank you, Dr. Esposito. That was fascinating. We got lots of good feedback from that. We did get some questions that we won't have time to take today, but we will pass those along to the education team. And I just did want to let everyone know that GenomicInsight is available, so you can contact the customer service department and immediately have access to these test kits and be able to use the use the tools that Dr. Esposito talked about today. So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Esposito, once again.